Welcome. We are going to cover, this is remote learning from survival to exceptional. And in this hour, we're going to cover fostering student interactions. I'm Christina Churchill, the Academic Technology Director for the School of Business, and I will be moderating this webinar. What you can do as I will go through introducing everybody and start the discussion. If you have questions, feel free to click on the Q&A button down at the bottom and we will answer your questions as much as possible. So if the first person wants to start, let's see. Who wants to go first?
Hi,
okay.
I'm Maryann Cairns. I am an assistant professor of anthropology in Dedmon, and I teach courses that are generally upper level seminars or advanced undergrad seminars. I've also taught some intro classes. I tend to have between, 15 and 30 students on the undergrad side, and then about 5 to 10 students on the grad side.
Hi, I'm Diane Gifford. I'm from the Department of Teaching and Learning in Simmons School of Education. I teach literacy courses to both undergrads and graduate students. Typically, I have between 10 to 20 students in each of my classes, and I've been teaching somewhat online in some cohorts since 2015.
I'm Eva Oberdöerster, biology. I just finished my 20th year at SMU, and I've taught everything from freshman biology for majors and non-majors all the way through senior seminar. Most recently, I teach the anatomy and physiology sequence for majors, which is anywhere from 25 to 50 students, including labs that I cap at 32. And I've been doing a flipped classroom for my lab for a couple years now. And I have obviously migrated online with my classes this semester. They're smaller. I had 26. My senior seminar was 11, and then my lab was 16.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monnie McGee from Statistical Science in Dedmon College. I've been at SMU for 18 years, and I have taught classes ranging from our introductory statistics course, which could have anywhere up to 100, 120 students, all the way through, most undergraduate courses in our department have 15 to 20. And this last semester, I taught a course that had about 28 in it, but our major is exploding, so our class size is getting larger. I also teach graduate courses, and those are typically smaller, 5 to 8 students. And I also developed the online Master Science and Data Science program that was starting in 2014, 2015, and that's a fully online program using the flipped classroom model, but doing it online.
I guess I'll go. Hi, I'm Christoper Dolder. I'm the chair of dance here at SMU. I teach kinesiology, composition, various levels of Martha Graham technique. And prior to this event, I've been here about 11 years. Prior to this event, none of our classes has ever been taught online. So I had to proctor the entire shift from a physicalized learning in reality into a virtual teaching. So it's been quite a interesting battle.
I'm Brian Zoltowski. I'm a professor in the Department of Chemistry. I teach entry-level chemistry classes, so first-year chemistry, which can have anywhere from 40 to 100 people. I also teach upper-level classes, graduate-level classes in biophysics, which is a very different end of the spectrum. Particularly for the first-year courses, which I was doing this spring, this is the first time I went to an online format, and because it is a first-year course, one of the things I value most in it is making connections between students and getting them to be better at working in groups and feeling comfortable working with professors. So that was particularly then a challenge in transitioning that over to an online format this semester.
Great, thank you so much. And I do, if you're just joining us as an attendee, I do want to remind everybody this is a webinar format, so you will not be able to see your camera and you can't, there's no audio on your end. So if you have questions, please feel free to click on the Q&A button down at the bottom and submit your questions, and we will try to cover them as much as possible. So the title of this webinar is Fostering Student Interactions, and obviously fostering interactions with students face-to-face versus online is very different, and there are some challenges with that. I kind of think communication is one of the key components in fostering student interactions. Can you describe, and we'll kind of rotate around, or can you describe a little bit on the methods you use to keep connection or keep communication with your students to make sure that they feel that connection with you? And if anyone wants to volunteer, or I can just ask specific.
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
One of my first priorities was to make sure that no students got lost in whichever remote environment they're in. I have no idea what all of their situations are. So the first thing I implemented was for every single student to assign a ballet buddy or a friend, a resource, at least one or two, then tell me exactly what space and internet connectivity they were existing within, and then just really the general environment, so that no matter what, I had students checking on each other, and also those students all then checked in with me. In addition to that, each time that I would start class, or I asked my faculty to start classes, to dedicate a few minutes to just have that interaction, have that feedback. How are you doing within all of this kind of the emotion in the pandemic? And, kind of get the emotions out of the way so they don't get carried in and then get kind of, this weird veil of these tiny little boxes can really hide a lot of what's going on. And we lose so much in dance in terms of there's so much proprioceptive learning because you see the bodies around you, and that's taken away completely. And so to really be aware of that, and to be aware of how much, how you are prompting your students. As far as interaction, I many times will stop class, I'll pick 8 boxes, 8 people, and say, you're now the observer, and then they'll be watching the others do it. So then they start to kind of converse back and forth, so that we really break through this two-dimensional little box and window and really have a sense of that we're virtually, in the same room.
That's great. That's great. Does anyone want to add to that?
I might add one little thing if possible. One of the things I try to emphasize, because a lot of people going to this online format is not comfortable. And they feel very awkward in the setting. So one of the things I try to do from the very beginning is letting people understand that that is perfectly normal. I hate being on camera. This is one of the more miserable things I probably had to go through for a semester, is constantly being the one on camera. And I try to emphasize that to students that, this is something that even for me is very uncomfortable, and I have to basically just find ways to deal with it so that they don't feel like they're on an island. And I think that's a lot of the thing we kind of need to emphasize, is that this is not something that's comfortable for anybody. It's an awkward experience for all the people involved, so that they feel like they're not alone. Then the other part is just trying to make yourself available. And each professor can dial in as much as they want, how much time they're willing to commit. But by setting aside different time periods for going over problems, sometimes even just talking to them, they just want to have contact with an individual. So giving those times for basically open discussion about anything, I think is very important.
And then to follow up on Brian's point, the other thing that I did this semester is I just did like a 30, 45-second goofy little announcement video, like once or twice a week, usually twice a week, like on Mondays and Fridays, like, hey, how did your weekend go? And this is what, we're doing in class this week. And just make it, instead of just like a written typed announcement, it was me on video, which again, following Brian was very awkward, because then, I have to, be on video. It's not great. But they actually, so you can see on Panopto who watched it. I would say only about like half the class watched them. But those that did watch them, would send me emails back, and it would definitely make it more interactive to have that sort of more casual video interaction than just typed messages from the professor.
Right. I think being present in the course and in different mediums, I think helps a lot for the students. We do have a question that came in. Could Christopher expand on what he meant by assigning one student to be an observer, and how does this work in an online course format?
Well, they're obviously all remote, but then, then we'll say, okay, then I'll have a group of students, say 8 students, repeat the exercise. And so then the student who's not repeating the exercise, they're literally looking through their screen, and now they are the teacher observer seeing someone in their remote environment. So in a way, it just puts it around to where they're not just in their own insular environment and being told what to do and qualified. They now get to step through, change the lens, and be the person that's now having to discern what's going on in the opposite box, what's going on in that opposite environment. And I think it changes their mind perception of really just, observation. So that by transferring it to observing somebody else, and in essence, they can start to feel like how they are then observed. I do it in real time as well, but I feel like it draws a different feeling. Sometimes it's just being stuck in front of this inert little laptop and it just kind of a death to it. Then it brings a little bit more life and discernment through the other way. So it becomes more of a two-way cross communication.
Great. I have a question. So how have, SMU has the reputation of having that personal touch, the face-to-face personal touch connection. How have you been able to foster that now that we've shifted to remote learning? What kind of things have you done? Marianne, if you don't mind answering that one, of just what are some things that have worked for you that you have tried to implement to continue that?
Sure, absolutely. So in addition to sending out announcements like I'm giving away free t-shirts at a football game, I've been quite focused on making sure that I pay extra care to make sure that the assignments are very clear. And then I've also used the peer review function in Canvas, and I always use a peer review option, but this has really kind of created buddies like some of the other panelists have talked about. So that has really been a great option. I also have office hours just as I normally would, and actually I've had more students come to office hours now that they're on Zoom, which is interesting. But I think all of that has kind of given them connection with each other, given them connection with me, and kind of moved the class forward.
That's great. That's great. I did get a question come in. Did any of you notice a change in student attendance to office hours? And Monty, do you mind addressing that one?
Well, I kind of set up my course differently. I had my office hours so I set up my course where I was live at the regular course time on Tuesday, Thursday, 9:30 to 11 Central Time. Of course, that caused some problems for some students, and this was the biggest issue, was time zones, because 9:30 Central is 7:30 Pacific, and that was kind of hard for some students to do. So of course I recorded the meetings, and I tried to keep in touch with students that way too. And also, but as far as noticing a change in attendance, I felt like the students were attending the courses at about the same rate. It was those students who didn't attend very well before were still not attending very well. And those who were attending pretty much every class were still attending pretty much every class for the most part. Again, except for those who were having trouble getting up at a strange time. And I admit to being at a loss as to what to do about that, except to contacting them and telling them, hey, these videos are recorded. I set everything up in a box folder so you can watch the recordings after. Trying to communicate with them via email mostly. But as far as attendance was, I didn't really notice that much of a shift. But when I did have office hours, so the classroom was one thing. When I did have office hours, I had like 12 to 13 students show up all at once. Whereas on campus, I had office hours and I would go weeks without seeing anyone. Maybe one or two dropping in every now and then. And I don't know if it's just a convenience thing or I don't know what it was, but they came. And I usually had a plan. Maybe that was part of it, because I had a plan. I was like, okay, if you come, I'll go over the homework or something like that. So maybe that was more my planning on it rather than just whatever they wanted to do and drop by if you want, that sort of thing.
That's great. So this next question, I kind of would love to get a lot of different feedback from you guys. What kind of activities, active learning opportunities did you provide face-to-face, and how did that shift to online? How were you able to shift? What did you do? And Diane, do you mind starting us off with that?
Definitely, I'd love to. I tried to think about this online environment as I would my face-to-face environment. And when that being the case, I'm constantly thinking of activities that my students could do in the online environment in order to be interactive and be engaged. And some of the things I used were polling at the beginning of class in order for them to kind of be engaged with me right up front. then making sure that I don't talk more than 10 or 15 minutes at a stretch, making sure that I get them into breakout rooms and have an activity. And that requires actually, you know, with one of my classes that was strictly face-to-face, it required that I have, every time I set up my module page, I had my class resource page. I always would set up a class resource page. This is what we're doing today. So it required me to be very prepared in order to even have breakout groups already assigned so that they would know that they're going to be here and they're going to be discussing such and such. And just making sure that we are constantly moving back from a main class kind of discussion into maybe breakout room discussion, have something that's a product that comes back into the main area. And that was, it just keeps them going. And it's not like I'm talking to them for, you know, an hour and 20 minutes, which makes a big difference.
Great. Does anyone else want to expand on that?
I can go. So I teach more of a traditional lecture type class. I teach all the pre-meds. They're actually on their way to med school. And in my endocrinology class, in face-to-face, I usually do maybe once a lecture where they break out and here's a patient, talk about the patient, and then come back and tell me about what you figured out. Couldn't really do that as well. I was teaching asynchronously. I had several students that only had like 2 devices, but 4 people in their family needing to use it. And like legitimately, that was the case. So I did teach asynchronously Panopto recordings. The other thing that I would do though is in the Panopto, I'd insert like a little quiz like, hey, when we did our nutrition section, go weigh out how many grams of sugar are in a can of Coke, do the math, and then send me an email of teaspoons of sugar. And I was amazed, like it doesn't take a lot of brain power, but they get their whole family in on it. And like psychologically, it was really cool to see that effect on the students where they had like an activity while they're quarantined that they could do as a family, and then they are all mortified at how much sugar was in the can of Coke. So just doing little things like that, that's really easy to do. And then get that psychological, like I am not a 2D thing, I can actually get my family in there, was really surprisingly beneficial to the students.
Great. Brian, do you want to add to that on active learning opportunities?
I can add a little bit of that. Basically, it's kind of echoing on what Eva is exactly doing of getting other people involved. And I usually do something like this that's a live thing in class during the regular semesters, but I do something that I call Chem Night, where it's supposed to be fun and relaxing and kids do anything they want to that is creative and involves chemistry, and then present it into the class and they get some bonus points. They only get a handful of bonus points that really impacts their grade 0, but they think it has like the biggest influence on their overall grade. So it works great because it's a lot of fun. And this year what I did is had them basically make videos and get their family involved, anybody they could get involved in basically doing and talking about chemistry or fun. And it was great. It broke down the barrier. A lot of students did little TikTok videos or other things that it made them have fun with it. And it kind of broke the barriers down between chemistry, online, and kind of making fun of the whole event as opposed to it being a burden.
That's great. That's great. We did get a question come in that says, I feel many of my students are checked out once we go online. How did you address this?
I did something that really helped, and I talked to them directly about what I needed from them. One thing that I did is I had synchronous classes, but some of my students had similar limitations to what Eva described. So some of them were listening to the classes as basically a podcast. So I asked those students who were able to come to class and who were able to get their assignments done before the class to really speak up and really take responsibility and try to teach others about that. And I asked anybody who wasn't able to do it yet, who was in class, to ask questions. And once I asked for their buy-in, that really was helpful. And I think we can all kind of just trust that they also want to help during this time. So that was something that I did that was really effective.
That's great. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay, let me ask you this. What methods did you use to encourage student interaction, right? So collaboration within each other, or just really establish this unity amongst student to student? Like what kind of things did you do in the classroom or maybe just on the Canvas course that helped bring that unity?
I think one of the things that I did, this has been mentioned before, but breakout rooms pretty much every time. I would have a short assignment and get the students into breakout rooms, and I just did mine at random. I let Zoom decide who was going to be in each breakout room. And I would cycle through the rooms, and as I did that, they were actually talking about the exercise, which was really good, and they were coming up with some interesting questions. And sometimes my classes involve a lot of coding, so they inevitably one person would designate themselves as the person who's doing all the coding, and then the other people would be giving them suggestions. They'd be sharing each other's screens. And I saw some of the same thing when I do the same sort of thing in my physical class, but I think it was easier for me to actually cycle through and hear what they were saying in the online class. So anyway, and can I address this? There's a question in the chat. Can I address it about
absolutely
approving time management with breakout rooms? I don't, it's really hard because, especially if you have a big class and only 50 minutes, it's really hard to cycle through and do everything with the breakout room. And one of the things to make sure that you do is make sure that whatever you're assigning them, maybe you give it to them a little bit before the class and say, this is what, like Diane was saying, this is what we're going to do. Here's your thing. We're going to do this in a breakout room. And you've got 3 minutes. And maybe not cycling through because that takes a long time, especially if you have a lot of breakout rooms. And the other thing is I had an 80-minute class, not a 50-minute class. So I didn't have the time constraint. And one of the things I wonder is if we have to do this again, maybe every class should be 80 minutes because it is a little harder to get stuff done when you have to work with the technology. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
And go ahead.
I was just going to add real quick, the breakout room function has a broadcast function, and I always broadcast the question that I'm asking them to talk about so that they don't have to spend 30 seconds reminding themselves what the question was. So that always helps.
Great. That's great.
There's usually a time limit. You can set a time for it. So if you only want 5 minutes in there, you can set that 5 minutes, and then it takes them out of it after the 5 minutes. So they should become that prepared to talk about whatever you're talking about.
Perfect. So do you think, this is a question that came in, do you think it's realistic to expect student interaction in a class larger than 100 for first-year students?
I might be good. I was actually going to comment related to this back to the other question, because a lot of the discussion on how getting students involve classes that have a lot of innate discussion of things and activities that can be shared easily. In a large class, particularly something like chemistry, where it's mostly math-based, that's not as easy to do because they're all doing their own individual thing. If everybody had an iPad that they could be working on the same problem and annotating side by side together, that'd be one thing, but we can't force every student to have an iPad or tablet device that can be shared. So it makes it a little more challenging in a class of 60, 100 people that is, say, math-based. So I tried to instead to get people kind of bought in and involved was more in the office hours aspects, where in office hours, fewer amounts of people will be showing up at a given time. And you can use that as time to get them to discuss together. They start talking about, oh, I had a problem with that problem too. This is what I did. And you get students basically answering each other's questions for them. And you start to get students that show up because they just want to learn from another student. So there's different strategies for those big classes, but sometimes in office hours, or even just setting up a little Zoom session for groups of them to work on specific problems that are outside of class can be done. But it's harder in the bigger classes to really do these breakout sessions in an effective manner.
Right. And then also, I think, Brian, you mentioned this, that internally versus externally motivated students, like internally motivated students, those are easy. They're having a great time with this. The externally motivated ones, and I mean, like I said, I teach pre-meds, they're all off to med or dental school, and I still have that issue. What I've been doing is, because I teach asynchronously, in Panopto, I put in a quiz every 7 or 8 minutes. And if you've been paying attention, it's really easy. And it's usually something goofy and fun, or I related back to their life. And then even the ones that you have to externally motivate do tend to interact a little bit more if you can do that. And like I said, mine is mainly lecture-based because they just have to know this stuff from med school. So there's rarely do we have a lot of discussions going on. So that's my hint, is like in Panopto. And this is why I don't just put up the MP4 file from the Zoom session, because you can't insert those quizzes. So then people who are not able to be there synchronously, they don't have that interaction ability. And that's why I use the Panopto. That's my number one reason, is to get that interaction.
Yes, but I do want to make a plug-in for Panopto. We are doing a session at 4 o'clock today if you want to get more information on how to do that. And I think the question of intrinsically motivated and extrinsically motivated is really big. It's easy to motivate students that are motivated intrinsically. There was a question that came in, any age-related differences in online teaching from first-year college students to grad school, to grad students to adult non-credit learning. And I think that also ties into intrinsic and extrinsic, because typically a grad student or somebody that has a lot more skin in the game, or that is a lot more interested in that specific topic, is going to be more motivated to learn that. And so the challenges is how do you motivate the students that aren't or don't have that reason for motivation? So anyone want to add to that on how to do that, or what are some things that you've seen that have worked?
Well, I'll just contribute. My classes are typically between about 10 and 20, so I don't have 100-person classrooms. But nevertheless, if I find that a student is sitting back and really not paying attention as much or not engaged, and I did see some of this when we went from face-to-face to online. It was like the students who were totally engaged in the face-to-face world all of a sudden became sort of disengaged, and I try to call on them a little bit more, and in a couple of cases I actually send them a little email and say, hey, how you doing? I want to just connect and make sure everything's good with you. And and that opened up discussion. And some of them were just actually very alone. Maybe they were in their apartment by themselves and they didn't know how to handle it. So there was some personal things sometimes that contributed to this lack of engagement. And just by being open and reaching out is really important, because they need to feel you. Even if you're teaching asynchronously, they need to know that you're there at all times. They need to be able to have a presence that's the teacher that they can reach out to. So I think that that's very important.
Great. And so we kind of come up with this asynchronous versus synchronous. Asynchronous being recorded videos, synchronous being, okay, everybody's connecting at the same time in a Zoom meeting. So, and we have a couple questions that came in that kind of tie into that, but on how do you handle a 4 hours a day course? Do you do that for it synchronously, or how do you handle that? Can you describe a little bit on how you handled your typical lectures, what you use, asynchronous or synchronous, and just kind of describe your methods? And Eva, if you want to start with that, I'd love to get everybody's feedback on that.
Sure. So the 4 hours, that would be very difficult. So traditional lecture course, I pre-record in Panopto. As I said, every few 7, 8, 9 minutes, I put in a little quiz, and it can be something as like inane, like, hey, what did you have for dinner last night? As we're talking about digestive system, or have you ever broken a bone? As we're talking about bone. So it doesn't have to be content heavy, but just to kind of get them involved. And then the other beauty with Panopto is you can insert YouTube videos, which is kind of nice, so that you don't have to create 4 hours of content, and it gives them a little bit of a break. And then you can also do sort of longer answer questions in the quizzes, so that you're gonna, say, okay, at the end of this time, put in your quizzes, and then when we come back, so what I've done is I just do a quick 30 minutes every Wednesday morning, a live Zoom session for those that can make it, where I answer that week's questions. So I did do that. Not every week, because we didn't have questions every week, but I did it 4 times since spring break. So just kind of breaking it up with different techniques. like I said, I love Panopto. I had a really steep learning curve, so I put it together like a little thing for my department on how to use Panopto, the quick guide to it. But once you learn it, there are limitations. It's really, really nice. I mean, it's really because you can put in the YouTubes, or you can put in the quizzes, and you can put in the extended comments type thing. That does make it a pretty useful tool. But do use some live stuff as well.
Christoper, can you give us some feedback on that, on how you handled that?
Well, I mean, just in general, to really make sure that I'm getting to every single student, Panopto was very helpful, because I would have students, I would assign them different exercises to film on their own. I actually would film classes, and we could see that in general and talk to it as a class, but then I would have one-on-one conversations, and I'd have each student have at least 2 different videos that we would talk about, so that I could share my screen, we'd play the video, and we both would kind of discern what we're seeing. And it's really a fine adjustment. I did it live as well, but when a student really finally sees themselves and sees the context by which I'm kind of discerning, there's a lot of light bulbs that go off, because how things feel and how their perception of what's really happening are quite different. So even the digital, and at which point then the digital interface actually improved it, because it literally was, we were both viewing the same kind of subject matter, the same assessment, the same rubric. And so students walked away from each of these meetings feeling quite a bit more confident, and with a whole new kind of set of, challenges.
That's great. That's great. How, in general, how do you guys keep students interested in learning? What are some techniques? And I guess this is kind of the same face-to-face or online, but I think online brings its unique challenges. But what are some things that you have learned in your year's experience and this spring that keeps them kind of hooked in?
So one thing that I did I always do in my classes, I have pop discussion leaders, where essentially the student will have to go out and find a little something extra related to class. So if we're talking about interviews that day, they have to go out and read a blog post about interviews or another article about interviews. And I kept that up, but over a discussion thread during the online format. And then I choose 2 people are graded per day on that. So that was effective. I will also say I taught a 3-hour grad class online. And I was surprised at how quickly it went by. And one of the things that I did is the first half we did kind of a traditional seminar. And then the second half I had either one-on-one meetings with each student, or, they worked in a group and I popped in. We used kind of the discussion sections. So it went by faster than I thought it was going to, I have to be honest.
That's great. We did get a few questions on PlayPosit and Panopto and learning how to use Panopto. I do want to kind of make a plug for, we actually are doing 2 webinars, both for PlayPosit and Panopto in these 2 days. So please make sure to register. If you're not available during that time slot, we will be posting the recordings on there. So hopefully that will be a really good resource for you to be able to engage in that. So we have another question coming in for first-year doc students who don't know each other yet, but will be part of a cohort. How do you handle that? How do you bring them together to kind of add that bond, I guess, during online education or remote education?
Can I answer that? Because we're actually facing that potentially in the fall. We have students that come from overseas, and maybe some of them won't be able to get their visas to come here before, assuming we open in the fall. So when she said doc, I assume she means PhD students, and we do have a PhD program in our department. One of the things that, obviously, one of the things I'm going to have them do is do a recap of when I have a first semester, first year statistical methods course. And one of the things I have each student do is be responsible for doing a little recap of their lecture for the day, and they have to do a PowerPoint. It has to be formal, and hopefully that'll give them some at least practice speaking and get the other students to know who each one is. The other thing that we do as a department is we do department tea time on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. And we've done that. We've kept that up online. And so that helps with the students. The students interact with the faculty that way. And we online, it's a little different because in person, it's more organic and you have people sitting around talking. Online, one of the things we did was go around and say, what are your hobbies? Tell me what you're doing, for a hobby. And so every person in the room went around, and I actually learned more online than I had just talking organically about in the room. So you can do little informal things like that, or if they're postdoc students, maybe you can do a little happy hour, or they can bring their own drink, or they can bring some tea, or they can bring whatever they want and do something like that.
If I could echo something kind of onto this, the focus for the question was on doctoral students. And we can do strategies like you're talking about, having tea times or just meet and greet times to get them involved. But if we are online in the fall, it's not just going to be just a doctoral student issue. We're going to have first year students coming in that are not going to have any of these networks that they're used to having. And at least, in my class, I teach freshmen. Most of them are pre-meds. A lot of times in my course, they get their network of friends that they carry through all their classes the entire semester. So we're going to have to be cognizant of this fact that these students are kind of on an island if we have to go in for the fall online and do things for all of our courses, where we try to have little sessions, a little extra 30-minute office hours where students can just interact on a more social scale. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to have this network of students, which is what SMU's comes to for. So I think it's something we have to be aware of, not just on the doctoral level, but potentially on the undergraduate and first year level, to make sure that we make these connections that are lifelong.
Good point.
And Brian, with our pre-med students, I have to tell you, a lot of them continue that network through med school, residency, and on to their careers. So it really does start their freshman year. So good point.
Yeah, I agree with that, because you have to make a community within your classroom. And I had these same students in my undergrad students for the whole entire year for different classes. But at the end, they wanted to actually meet outside of class, like at 5:30 at night, and they wanted to just have a party. And it was amazing that we were online for 2 hours and we were just having fun. So, you have to create that community. The community becomes really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. Okay. So this has come up as a question often. Webcam, requiring it to be on or off. What are your thoughts, struggles, successes? And this, not necessarily your webcam, but your students' webcams. What are some things that you would recommend?
Well, ours is essential because it's the movement idiom. It's not really what they're retaining in their heads. The only way they can demonstrate that is by how they physicalize that. So unless a student is specifically not feeling well, and I'll still have them be able to observe, then camera on and student moving.
I would agree with that too. And I think that if anybody's concerned about their environment, there's the virtual backgrounds that you can use. But, we're online we're face-to-face in class if we're in class. So that's an important thing. So we can gauge our responses and we can talk to each other, and we don't have to guess whether someone's looking at us or not.
Awesome.
I don't require it. I have asked for the same kind of buy-in from my students as I did in the class in general. If you're able to do so, please turn on your webcam, because it is an important part of the class. Like, step up if you're one of these people that isn't living with 6 other people in the same room doing a bunch of Zooms. But if you can't, I respect that. And I've had about half and half, and it seems to work fine. The students that don't have their webcam on are still participating, and I will continue not requiring it probably.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well, we have about 5 minutes left, and kind of going back to the topic of fostering student interactions. If you each can just spend really just 1 minute on advising, what would you tell the faculty out there? Like, what is the most important thing that you feel like is key for this success? And Diana, if you want to start.
Sure. I think the key to success is being prepared to kind of think through what you want to, if you're doing synchronous, which is what I do, to be prepared for what you want to do during the time frame that you are meeting with your class. And again, I I have other things. I have screencasts and other things that they watch. But if you're online and you're synchronous, you be prepared and know what you're going to be doing and have your activity structured.
Brian, if you want to add to that.
Sorry. I think really the main thing is, especially for the types of formats we're now, and we have to remember this is not a online format because people chose it. It's an online format because of a deadly virus circulating across the entire globe. And in that context, everything is different. We don't know why a student is struggling, what's going on in their own lives. And I think the most important part here is just being cognizant of the fact that everybody's in a different situation and being open to work with people in different scenarios. I think right now that's the number one aspect that's going to play a key role.
Marianne, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I think it's really important. I sent out a letter that was like, I know that these are some of the things that people might be dealing with, and we need to remember that. And then I also asked students to brainstorm the same so that they could kind of think outside of themselves and think through what other students in the class were going through. So I think that's really important. I think that the breakout rooms and at the beginning of each class, I have them kind of review what we did last class in a breakout room. That's been really effective. So, but I agree with Brian, the most important part is making sure that we think about what they're going through and that the students think about that too.
Absolutely.
And then I will add to that, ask them to talk to you. I mean, I know that sounds kind of weird, but like tell them, hey, I want to hear from you. I want to know what's going on. And you'll get a lot of responses because you kind of need permission almost to email the professor and not be in trouble about something, it feels like. And then as an endocrinology class, I taught about stress and the stress response like way back in February. So I actually rolled it back into a lecture topic. And one of the things that to decrease your stress is to think about others. So I actually had like a reflection question, like who is not doing well that you know, how are you going to reach out to them and make it better for them? And it just takes the focus off them and kind of broadens out their horizons a little bit.
Awesome, great. And Monty, do you want to add at all?
I just want to stress the importance of being prepared. I actually think the online environment is harder as far as being prepared, and because you have a limited time and you're dealing with a lot of different student situations. Mm-hmm. Knowing exactly what you want to do and when you want to do it, and also I communicated a lot more with my students through email, just sitting like almost every day saying, okay, here we are, this is what we're doing this week, this is this is where we were last time. Watch these videos, because I did do some asynchronous work. So communication and just being prepared in those breakout rooms, I think actually worked almost better online than I groups in the class did.
Awesome, great. Christopher, would you like to?
Clarity of expectation is everything. I'm teaching an idiom where they don't have large studios. They're not able to go across the floor. There's certain things that, if the word impossible I don't like, but in this instance, this kid has their living room at best. So you want to be very clear about, I understand how much space you have, and therefore I'm going to maximize how much I can do within the space that you are confined with. And the more you describe to the student what the rubric and what is the module or what you're trying to work on that week, the more that they can be called upon at any one moment to discuss it or to discern it from another student, or at the same time be called upon to videotape that and then hence later have a in-person, session. It's just the responsibility and clarity. So if it's just small modules, my point to all of my students and my faculty was, no matter what, move forward, be clear about what it is you're moving forward, and don't get anxious about what you're not doing. I think one of the biggest things, particularly in dance, is what's been taken away, and the students get all depressed and they can't do all those other things. But it's also important to remind them how much can be done in a very small, tight axial space. And I think that, we've really been successful with that. Our students managed to take a giant group concert called the Senior Dance Concert, film all these solos in their various hometowns. We hired an editor to put it all together, and we had a Zoom premiere, a week ago Saturday, so that it was still an event. There was still a big buzz about it, and since then I put it on Vimeo and it's had 2,000 views. So it's sometimes you just gotta shift around. But again, clarity of expectation, clarity of what you can actually get done given this new this current format.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you. We are out of time. Thank you so much to the panelists for taking time out of your day to answer these questions and help us through this time. And this recording will be available under the Keep Teaching tab at the SMU website. Thank you again for your time, and feel free to register for other webinars. We have many going on today and tomorrow. Thank you again.